Hi y'all, my name is Cydnee Sanders. If you watched our previous videos, welcome back. If you're watching for the first time, thanks for joining us and be sure to check out our other videos and topics. This video was made in partnership with Atlas ABE in St. Paul, Minnesota. We hope these videos are conversation starters for professional development for adult education educators. These bite-sized videos can be watched with colleagues or by yourself. I'll talk more at the end about the accompanying discussion guide that you can use as an additional resource. Today's topic is being a warm demander. Remember, in any of these topics, 10 to 15 minutes is not enough. So the idea of this, or really our hope, is that these begin the conversations among educators. Then we will do what we can to present different ideas, resources, and solutions in bite-sized chunks. As I mentioned, this is one topic out of a series we will be doing called Moving Equity Forward in Adult Education. Be sure to check out our other videos. So I always think a good place to start is with an overview of our topic. Let's take a look. Today we started with the welcome. Next, we will do another community check-in, which is a question I will pose to y'all to think about before the topic continues. Then we will define what being a warm demander is. After that, we will look at some classroom examples. And finally, we will wrap up by briefly going over the accompanying discussion guide. So let's start with our community check-in. Today's question is, when you were or are a student, what kind of teacher do you respond most to? Feel free to pause the video for a minute to think about this. If you're watching this with others, take a moment and talk about your answers. All right, great. If you pause, then welcome back. For me, I 100% respond better to teachers who I have a relationship with, who I know cares about me, who gives me positive reinforcement. It was the same thing for me as an athlete. If a coach was a jerk and yelling a lot, that made me want to not do whatever they were telling me. The teachers I remember from school growing up were the ones I got to know more, who were kind. All right, let's talk about this term warm demander. I know it's pretty vague without context. But first, I'll let you do some brainstorming. What do you think a warm demander is? Feel free to pause the video again to reflect and talk amongst your group. But otherwise, I'm going to keep going. So according to Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, the same book I got the culture tree from, which was in previous videos, and which is linked in the discussion guide. Hammond has a chart of 4 kinds of teachers. Let's take a look at a summarized chart I adapted from her book. These are the 4 kinds of teachers Hammond categorizes based on a spectrum of active demandingness, professional distance, passive leniency, and personal warmth. The warm demander focuses on building rapport and trust, earns the right to hold students to high standards, and is competent. The technocrat does not focus on rapport and holds students to high standards without support. The elitist also does not focus on rapport and trust and has a deficit view of students with low standards. Finally, the sentimentalist focuses on rapport and trust, but holds students to low standards, usually out of pity if students come from a background with poverty or oppression. Usually, they don't realize they're doing this. They just don't like pushing students too hard because life is often hard enough. Take another minute to think and talk about where on the chart you think you are and why. All right, but we'll continue. In full transparency with y'all, I am a sentimentalist. I think I focus on building relationships too much and sometimes forget to do the learning English part. Whoops. I usually teach in classes where there aren't really grades, but I need to be more intentional about meeting students' goals. I'm working on this. Hammond argues that the goal middle ground is warm demander who builds relationships and also holds students to high standards. She argues that this is the equitable teacher. Let's look more in depth of the definition of a warm demander. 1. Explicit focus on building rapport and trust. Expresses warmth through nonverbal ways. 2. Shows personal regard for students by inquiring about important people and events in their lives. 3. Earns the right to demand engagement and effort. 4. Very competent with the technical side of instruction. 5. Holds high standards and offers emotional support and instructional scaffolding to dependent learners for reaching the standards. 6. Encourages productive struggle. And 7, viewed by students as caring because of personal regard and tough love stance. Hammond explains trust is so important for learning. You need to build partnerships with each learner, and that comes from building trust. Students learn better when they feel connected to community, which helps them invest in their education when they feel supported. Reasonable high standards help students reach their goals. And as often taught in teacher education, students need productive struggle to learn material. The warm demander tries to do all of this. These are some suggested questions to ask yourself while making lessons or thinking about activities. Ask yourself 1, do you agree with Hammond that a warm demander encourages educators to have an asset-based approach while caring for learners with high expectations? 2, how are you already a warm demander? What could you do to strengthen these characteristics? 3, what is the impact of not having high expectations for learners? All right, let's look at a couple of examples you can use in your classroom. I see 2 main parts of the definition of the warm demander. 1, building relationships, and 2, high standards. So we'll look at examples of each. For the first part, trust and caring in the classroom, this is more than being a nice person. I think it's important for all of us to practice these skills. I think often this kind of human relationship building is forgotten about when we are rushing around. So I hope this is a reminder to slow down and practice these skills. 1, authentic listening. This means giving students our full attention when we are talking to them, being present, suspending judgment, and trying to understand something from their perspective or their culture. Actually valuing what they say, not just listening to them on the surface level. 2, vulnerability is very important with building trust. People feel more connected when both parties share about themselves. Now, as I talked about with the culture tree, we shouldn't take up all of the space and talk about ourselves all the time. We do want learners to share, but it's also important not to do the opposite and never share about ourselves. Share about your interest in lives. And 3, validation is also important. It's not about helping students' self-esteem. That's actually a deficit view. Hammond explains that authentic validation is about acknowledging people's hard work, that acknowledges their humanity. It helps build that connection. Ways to do this is validating student work in class, or maybe if you have a WhatsApp group with your learners, send a quick note after class about what they did well or worked hard on in class, or in one-to-one conversations or meetings with learners. Hammond has a helpful organizer to keep track of how much you intentionally engage and build a relationship with a certain learner. This list is Hammond's suggested steps of how to slow down and intentionally build a partnership with a learner. At first, this process felt a little mechanical to me, but I really do think that when we're busy teachers or even admin, it's helpful to have this laid out explicitly like this. So hopefully this can be helpful to others. She explains, especially if you feel like you're having a hard time connecting with a learner, to slow down and take this step by step. 1, identify a learner you would like to have a better learning partnership with. 2, assess the quality of your relationship with your focal student. How often do you interact? What are the interactions like? Positive? Negative? Do you ask about their interests? What's the student's reactions to your conversations? 3, create a system to help you look closely at and listen carefully to your focal student. 4, keep track of students' responses and these interactions over time. 5, crunch the numbers and analyze the data. 6, based on your findings, identify one small change you can make to build trust with your focal student. An example of a small change can be after certain football game days, ask the student about the game, or most comments I made are negative feedback. I'll work on acknowledging their effort more often. And 7, track the impact of the one small change you made. How are reactions changing with the students? Here's a couple suggestions Hammond has for holding learners to high standards. Again, this is a short intro. Hopefully we can do another more in-depth video, but until then, I recommend checking out Hammond's book. 1, creating a pact. Hammond talks about learning as a partnership. She explains that you should work with learners to create their learning goals. So you're talking with them, not just at them. These should be SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Make sure they know you believe in their ability. Celebrate small successes and remind them about needed accountability to help reach those goals. And two, quality feedback. Instructive. Give something specific to work on, not just good job, which I'm bad at doing. Timely, because you give feedback when students are still mindful of the topic and not giving feedback too often, so it's overwhelming. Pick one thing to work on, not everything you see that they should work on. Supportive, reminding learners mistakes are a good part of the learning process. All right, that's it for today's bite-sized tasks. Don't forget to visit the discussion guide for this video to deepen your understanding of this episode's topic. The link to the discussion guide can be found in the description to the video on YouTube and also linked on the Atlas website. The discussion guide provides questions, activities, and resources to learn more. We have linked the PDF of the slides and the guide also for your own notes. Also, remember to check out Atlas's Cultural Competency Library and the Minnesota ABE Connect newsletter for more resources. These links are in the discussion guide too. All right, that's it. Thank y'all for joining. Be sure to watch the entire playlist and like and subscribe so you don't miss a video. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.